You'll love this story. So I get there. So the guy gets up and he says, I'm going to tell you things that Wall Street doesn't want you to know. I think to myself, gee, I wonder if somebody from Wall Street wants to attend this session because they would learn what they didn't want us to know. So he spends an hour and 45 minutes. Now, he's really good. But what really impressed me was the guy that did the pitch. The pitcher, and I'm in the pitch business. I tell stories, and this guy was really great. So I decide after the fact, I'm going to find him.
Welcome back to the Wits Podcast. Once again, we have an awesome, wicked guest today. We have Neil Senturia, who is a classic serial entrepreneur. He's had 3 careers, and the joke is he's unable to hold a job, but he started out writing sitcoms in Hollywood. He moved into real estate development and finally into technology. He started 9 companies as CEO or chairman, and he's invested in another half a dozen. Currently, Neil is the CEO of Blackbird Ventures, which is a small venture fund that is focused on very early stage companies. Neil has been teaching entrepreneurship for a very long time, and along with his coaching currently, he's taught at San Diego State University in the MBA program, University of California, and he is currently teaching entrepreneurship at the Donovan State Prison. He has also authored books, one of them being I'm There For You, Baby, which is an entrepreneur's guide to the galaxy. Today, we're going to talk about storytelling. We're going to talk about partnerships, and he's going to share a little bit about what it takes to give back in the world and be successful. Neil, I am super excited to talk to you today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg.
What do you want to talk about today?
Well, in honor of the election, I'm going to tell a story. I've got a few stories, and we run out of time. Fine. So here's a story. You may remember it's about 2013, 13 or 14, and there's something called Trump University.
Yeah, I remember this.
It has promoted this thing called Trump University, and I'm fascinated. I get an email that says, would you like to attend Trump University? And I write back and I say yes. And so the session is held at the Town and Country Hotel. There's 4 sessions, 8 to 10, 10 to 12, and then 1 to 3 and 3 to 5. And the first one is on the stock market. And there's one on estate and one on real estate, but I'm going to go. Now, at this point in time, I'm the CEO of a startup, but I have a real business. And so to some extent, and I've certainly made some money over the time. So I'm going to go and see what happens. I am astounded. You'll love this story. So I get there. There are 400 people in this conference room, in this ballroom at the Town and Country Hotel. Wow. So I take a seat towards the back. I tend to sit at the back and I look around. Now, this is a little bit stereotypical and maybe a little bit racist, but I don't know. Nobody else looks like me. I mean, maybe a few of them do, but not that many. So I'm thinking to myself,
what's like
hey,
you?
Why aren't you guys at a job? I'm the CEO of a company. I can sort of take an hour off. Why? What? There's no jobs? What are you doing? So there's 400 people who have come to pay. Now, for this part of it is free. Okay, they're going to listen to the Trump University. This is great. So the guy gets up and he says, "I'm going to tell you things that Wall Street doesn't want you to know." I think to myself, gee, I wonder if somebody from Wall Street wants to attend this session because they would learn what they didn't want us to know. I mean, you got to just think about that. I'm going to tell you stuff that Wall Street doesn't want you to know. Okay, I'll accept that. So he spends an hour and 45 minutes. Now, he's really good. I mean, I'm going to tell you how good he is later. And he points out, he spends the whole session to explain that when the red arrow goes down, you have to sell. And when the green arrow goes up, you buy. This is fabulous. Wall Street does not know anything about red arrows and green arrows. And these 400 people do. It's fantastic. Okay. It gets to it's an hour and 40. At the hour and 45 minute mark, he says, okay, here's the deal. If you go to the first people who go to the back of the room and sign up, you get this, and you get this. And the total package, the starting package is like $800 and the total package is $3,000. You may remember that one of the law firms in San Diego actually sued Trump University and won a settlement of $25 million, but that was after the fact. This is real time, 2013, 14. I'm sitting there. I was dazzled. Maybe 100 to 120 people of the 400 go to the back. Like, whoa. And they sign up and they get a book and they get this and they're starting to write checks and credit cards. And I'm amazed. But what really impressed me was the guy that did the pitch. The pitcher, and I'm in the pitch business. I tell stories. I have a PhD in pitching, and this guy was really great. So I decide after the fact, I'm going to find him. So I call up the Trump University in New York, and I say, I'd like to talk to whatever, forget his name now, Bob Johnson. They said no. I said, what do you mean no? So we don't talk to you. But he was really good. I'd like to know. All right. Now, he was really good. He could spin a story. He was telling stories, and it was the little guy, and there's the man, and you guys are going to get empowered. He was fabulous. Now, I'm a pretty relentless character, so eventually I find him. He's in Colorado, and I call him. I say, I attended that session. You are the best I've ever seen. Could I hire you? He says, no. I said, let me ask you a question. Are you in the stock market? He says, are you kidding me? I said, what do you mean? He says, I just give that pitch. I learned the script. I'm a really good pitcher. I'm actually on a ranch in Colorado. I work 3-4 days a month. Trump flies me around. Do you buy and sell stocks? No. So you don't know anything about the stock market, but you're telling people that when the red arrow goes down, you sell it, and the green arrow goes up, you buy it. He says, yeah. I thought to myself, only in America. This guy is, and he talks as if he were in the stock business, had been Wall Street, worldwide, Goldman Sachs. And the answer is, he's an actor. I thought that was fantastic. But the dark sentence is, there were 120 people who were going to get conned. The idea that somehow, I love this part, which is, you always see TV ads, which is, we're going to tell you something the other guy doesn't want you to know. And I'm thinking, what, they don't have a television? They can't listen? They couldn't attend the session? That's my Trump University story.
But you know what you just described was the snake oil salesperson, the person that sits on stage and they stage sell, right? And, you know, this is what I've battled against in the industry, which is everyone's got this great pitch and this great outline and this great promise and this great this, and not many people. And that story just acknowledges that a lot of these, you got to be careful, man. Like, you know, if you're really going to go through the exercise of developing yourself as a leader, as a person, and you're going to be a better entrepreneur, a better business owner, you know, buyer beware. I think, you know, the question we've always got to ask ourselves is exactly that through that expert. Have they actually done it? So good for you for figuring out whether the guy was actually in the stock market.
So I'm gonna put the twist on the story. So I also teach, as you know, I coach CEOs. I've been a CEO 7 or 8 different times, and it's important. Now, remember, what I saw in that was that guy is a world-class pitcher, but by the same token, and I know you do this in your work, you need to teach the CEO how to tell a story. So I back a company called Shadowbox. I was an early investor. I'm on the board, and I like the guy a lot. It's software. It's electronic medical records. I won't bore you to tears. But about a week ago, 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, he gives a pitch to a bunch of investors. And one of them takes the time to say the following. You got great technology. You tell the story in a terrible way. You don't tell a very good story. So this isn't now. He has actually got the goods. Right. He really knows what he's doing, but he doesn't tell it very well. So part of the duality of this little story about the Trump pitcher, who has no substance, but he's world-class. He's Richard Burton for stocks. This guy is the real deal. And so one of the things you can do, and I spend time, is teaching people how to tell.
So let me ask you a question. And I'm going to ask you how, or what are some things that we could do to tell stories. So, you know, I love the fact that we sort of floated onto this topic because, you know, as human beings, we think in stories, we feel in stories, we see in stories, we talk in stories. Stories are to the core of who we are as beings, right? It's the same reason good marketing works, right? gone are the days of remember selling features and benefits where it was like, oh, this is what the technology does or whatnot. It's like, well, paint the picture, paint the story. It draws out the most innocent child in us, which is the imaginative child. So I know I've sort of prefaced this, but how important is it for leadership today to be a good storyteller? And part of that question, how important it is to have a real story?
Well, that's a really good question. So the famous story, the first story is Steve Jobs. So Jobs had what was called sort of an alternate reality. He was a masterful storyteller. He could get people to believe that, like Uri Geller, he could bend a spoon with, his mind. But by the same token, he also developed Apple and world-class technology. Okay. So that's kind of interesting. But he was a cult figure. Cool. Now, by the same token, let's go to the woman who runs Theranos. Theranos is the company that raised $1 billion and was a fraud run by a woman because she was going to do a testing with one drop of blood. Yeah. It's called Theranos, Theranos, and it's Elizabeth, and I forget her last name. She was a cult figure. She wore a black turtleneck to all the events. She was attractive. She had blonde hair, and she spun a tale of total fraud and corruption. But she was a believer. She told a great story. Let's do another one. So there's a guy named Adam Neumann. Adam Neumann ran a company called WeWork. WeWork was the company that raised a couple of $1 billion and was going to be in the real estate business, renting out, buying real estate, 20 floors, and then renting it to startups.
Shared office space.
He was a guru, not a guru. He was a shaman. He was a magician. He had people believing. He did crazy things. There's an article in the New York Times recently about it. There's a book about it. But he was a storyteller. So now you come to something interesting. Does the storyteller have an obligation to tell the truth?
How important it is in today's world, and you just hit it right. Like, you could lead people through darkness. You could, corruption, the whole sort of nine. But now that we know people are led by stories, how important is it for us to be truthful, have honesty? Maybe even the bigger sort of, with great powers comes great responsibility, which is if you can move people with story, where does that fine line fall?
When you tell a story. So now watch, you can tell this is the absolute truth as I know it today. You can bend it a little. And then there's the part that says, I'm going to tell something and I'm going to believe that by the time I need to deliver on it, I'll be there. So the famous line, of course, excuse me, in Canada with Wayne Gretzky is, I'm going to skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it is today. So you've touched on a kind of an interesting area, which is now my personal nature, is I have a tendency towards forward-looking statements, meaning I'm assuming that by sheer force of will, charisma, or brains, or luck, I can get to where I sort of thought that I'm going to tell them that I'm going to get to. Now, I'm also of the school of thought that if you don't get there, you got to give the money back. You can't run it into the ground. But part of what makes people believe that they can climb a mountain that they've never climbed is to tell them that they can climb that mountain, even though you haven't climbed that mountain either. So that's this quality of a combination of leadership, belief, imagination, but the dark side, of course, is ego. Her name is Elizabeth Holmes at Theranos, Holmes. Yes. So the ego of Neumann, the ego of Elizabeth Holmes, those are dangerous. They really are dangerous. And then in the case of somebody like Jobs or Jeff Bezos, their ego and Elon Musk. I mean, Musk is a storyteller. Right. We're going to go and launch satellites. Nobody believes him. We're going to build a car that runs on electricity. But even if he delivers.
I think stories are so important in the sense that For me as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this, and I connected with your statement of like, I just on some occasions have been successful out of pure will, grit, charisma, storytelling, forward thinking, visionary. In some cases, lying to myself in order for me to get there. And we can argue that's things like mindset and sort of your inner dialogue. But at the end of the day, you know, telling stories of vision, where we're going, is one thing, right? But using stories to manipulate is a different. And I think, you know, that's where we started with this, which is in a lot of cases, it's hard to know the difference. And that's where they talked about the con man, right? Right. Your best friend, the greatest thing about a con man is you've never known you've been conned until it's too late. Right? Movies, thinking stories. I mean, think about religion, spirituality, great leaders, thought leaders. It's all about stories. Anyway, I agree. Let's not go down the dark side of stories because, as we said, you know, with great powers comes great responsibility, and we can always use this. Hey, I'm Greg Witz. Thanks so much for coming and checking out the video. If you like that video, you're going to love the next one. So I'd highly suggest that you click this video over here. And don't forget to subscribe and share.